Okay, we're on. We're live.
We're live to nobody. Awesome. Just the way I
Yeah.
wanted it. Um, do we
Okay,
have a
cool.
link or anything that we should put anywhere, or do you even want to care about that this time?
Um, it's public.
Yeah,
Um,
but like,
so
let me just.
we'll send the link out afterwards. I mean, because this is
Okay.
the first time,
Yeah, of
I
course.
wouldn't be too worried. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, let's see. I know you haven't made any videos for your channel yet, have you? Is this
No,
the
not at
first
all.
one?
No. So I do actually have a few questions for you,
Okay. Sweet.
Saint Sebastian.
Yeah.
So why the name Saint Sebastian?
Well, growing up, I was raised Catholic, and you go through confirmation, and you're supposed to kind of take on a saint to adopt as your like patron saint of sorts, and mine was Saint Sebastian. He's the patron saint of sports or of athletes and soldiers specifically. And the guy was allegedly, I'm not even 100% sure the guy was real or not. But anyway, um, he was preaching Christianity while it was an illegal idea and converting people to the idea, got caught doing it, didn't renounce his faith, was executed for it, survived his execution, and then went back to his executors to be like, yo, fuck you. I still believe I'm still right. And then they beat him to death. So kind of sad, kind of negative ending at the end there, but just the have a guy who has kind of the balls to stand up for his beliefs to that degree, I think is commendable. And even if I don't actually believe in the God ideas anymore, I think that's a person, mythological or not, worth taking note of and trying to emulate. If that answers the questions, I guess.
Death as it is. Live like a saint, die like a saint.
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah. At least in that case, often I'm sure there's a good dozen other examples of saints that I wouldn't want to emulate, but that one is a guy I'm happy to try to. Um, any reason you went with Benedict Stein? Yeah.
I mean, honestly, I think I was around 15, 16 years old.
Yeah.
Um, it's kind of funny because Stein just sounded German, and I thought that was kind of cool. Um,
Hilarious.
and
Hilarious.
Benedict, I kind of got over like eggs Benedict, and I just kind of
Okay.
mashed the two together, and I was like, okay,
That's totally
Benedict
fine.
Stein. Yep.
Yeah, I have a buddy whose online persona for years was Fire Marmot, and I thought that was such a good online persona, and it was just like just a similar mashup of just like two random things,
Yeah.
and for whatever reason, it just went well together. Benedict
Mhm.
Stein sounds like an intellectual.
Yeah, that was kind of the point.
Yeah. Uh,
So,
so
what's the deal with your profile picture? Is it supposed to be Pepe or Kermit or, you know?
um so I'm moving out. I move out of my last house, which I'm just moved across town. It wasn't some big move or anything,
Hmm.
but I'm moving out, and my brother had been my previous roommate, and I'm moving and getting all the random shit out of his room, and like he's got like a megaphone in there. Who the
Hmm.
fuck? Who owns a megaphone? Like, what the fuck?
Alex Jones.
Yeah, exactly. So now I own a megaphone because fuck giving it back to him. But then I also found this.
Fluoride in the water is turning the frog gay.
Yeah, but then I also found this fucking frog. Yeah, he's just chilling, legs crossed, with the double okay going on. And apparently, my dad got it. It's my dad's that my brother stole from him, and he got it in Arizona in like 2011 or something.
Hmm.
And it's just been sitting in some other random house that my parents own that I'd never seen before. And yeah, they sold that house. It got brought over here. My brother stole it from them. I stole it from my brother. But it's just like
Hmm.
it's too perfect, especially with the allegedly alt-right OK logo being the white supremacist bullshit. I don't know if you've seen that one, but that mixed with the fact it's the frog doing it is just too hilarious. It's too on point for Pepe. And
it is. Yep.
Pepe's kind of in a way the modern incarnation of Saint Sebastian in his own kind of way.
Yeah. Pepe, even you heard, got killed by his creator and then resurrected.
That's what I'm telling.
So he's kind of like, you know, except Pepe's kind of like, you kind of went beyond in the sense that, yeah, maybe he did get killed, maybe he didn't, but you know, he resurrected.
Yeah,
which is interesting.
Yeah, resurrection stories are important in the in those mythologies. Yeah, I'm a big. That's one thing I want to make. The next couple of videos I make kind of focus around is I've been listening a bunch to Joseph Campbell again, which I haven't done in a year or two. And he has a book called Hero with a Thousand Faces, where he kind of talks about the monomyth, which is like the underlying structure of all mythology. He kind of believes that all religion and all mythology is essentially telling the same story. And he kind of has a fundamental bedrock of what that story is. And I think I agree with him. I think I buy it. And the resurrection part of that story is a really fundamental part.
Interesting.
If you don't die and get resurrected, you can't stop being a child. And that's why religions exist. That's why mythology exists, is to turn dependent children into responsible adults.
Interesting.
In like the psychological.
I'll have to take a look at that.
Yeah, it's I have a slightly different view than Campbell did, but he definitely flipped me from like being raised Catholic to atheist, being like hard anti-theist for a while, like religion is the worst thing in the world, to now I kind of buy his perspective that like, no, there's a utility to these things, there's a reason they exist. Just have to figure out what that reason is and which ones are better than the other ones.
Yeah, it's interesting.
So, what are your first videos going to be centered around, do you think? Or
I think it's going to be a bit of a call to action. Exactly what my channel is going to be about. Explaining what my channel is going to be about. I think it's kind of important to have one, especially with me personally, because it just says Benedict Stein. What does that convey? What does that mean? And I mean, it's going to be a political news channel with maybe a touch. I'm not going to be. It's going to be a little bit more oriented.
You're cutting in and out a bit, and I'm not sure if that's you or me. And now it sounds like dead air.
But it's going to be... Is everything okay on your end?
Hello.
Sounds like there are...
Yeah, there's stuff going on in the background here, but I'm just having trouble hearing you at all.
Really?
Oh, there we go. That sounds much more clear. It's just... Yeah, with the last couple of sentences you were saying were garbled. I wasn't sure if that was me or you having the bad connection.
Okay, so basically I was talking about how I want to make an intro video, basically talking about how this is a politics, philosophy, ethics channel. And although it's not, at least not yet anyway, going to be oriented as much on the philosophy side, because I'm still kind of sorting myself out, but it's going to be mostly discussing current events and perhaps propagating certain perspectives that might not be to the mainstream, but are still like they're iconoclastic, but they're not delivered in such a way that makes me sound like an actual radical, so to speak, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. Well, like politically, which perspective do you think you come at it from? Because I sort of feel like the mainstream or the accepted political perspectives are tend to be like authoritarian left and right, and the libertarian right is sort of the meme culture, internet jokes, and I feel like the libertarian left is really sort of lacking in representation. But I'm not really sure exactly where you fall on that line of perspectives. I think you're more libertarian right than myself.
Which is kind of funny because, first thing to just address your point, the majority, at least the majority of the people who take the political compass test, and I've seen this on online forums as well to corroborate, right? They mostly lie on the libertarian left.
Yeah, they land on there quite a bit more, which sort of makes me not a fan of the spectrum thing, because there's a few questions on there that I think are a little not the best.
Well,
and,
I mean, yeah.
And I just wonder, like, should such a test strive to have equal representation in all four quadrants? Or if 60% of people in the current cultural zeitgeist land in the libertarian left, is that just how it is?
Well, my view of the spectrum is, well, first off, the person who's actually in charge of making up the political spectrum test is not himself, or I guess it's himself, unbiased. He is
definitely.
He is to the left. He does word some things that I now, as going back to the test every once in a while, I notice certain phrases or that don't seem to make that much sense. That don't seem to.
Like the options aren't. The option you'd want to pick isn't really there.
Yeah, exactly. And it's
So like I really like the idea of the quadrants. I'm not a huge fan of the test, at least not of that one.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's a problem because what this test seems to do, at least from my perspective, is it seems to actually perpetuate stereotypes of each of the quadrants.
Okay, I can see that.
You know, when it comes to me being on the quadrant, it leads me to question actually my position on the quadrant, but also because I'm firmly on the right. And
without taking the test, where would you put yourself on there?
Without taking the test, I mean, the problem is I think my view on where I am on the spectrum has been so tainted by the test.
Okay.
Because for many years I kind of relied on the same test, and then when it's inaccurate, it kind of makes me question the.
Yeah, I was familiar with I was familiar with the chart, the quadrant chart, probably for a year or two before I'd ever seen the test, and I've only took the test like a year ago. So for me, I sort of associated the test, sort of confirmed where I thought I landed. Mm-hmm. But you're right in that most people land there, so I'm not 100% sure if it's because I authentically land there or if it's because the test is flawed.
Yeah, I actually do think the test is deeply flawed because it seems to imply a lot of things about the person who is holding the positions that it allows you to pick. So, for example, when it talks about corporations are whatever is good for the largest corporations is good for the people. Yeah. And from my perspective, I'm pretty firmly to the right. So when I see that, especially like when I was younger taking the test, it was 2012, 2013, whenever, I wasn't as politically aware of a lot of jargon that was being used as I am now. Before I used to think, so the way this question is worded, sure, it just means that, when corporations have tax breaks, that means that they tend to expand their operations, right? So that's what it means, right? So of course I'm for big corporations. But then when I figure out that this person who wrote the test is slanted to the left, suddenly I can kind of detect where the tone comes in, the kind of negative tone connotation that answering that question is.
There's such a failure in that distinction. Corporation's a terrible buzzword where I get you, because like there's a difference between the local butcher who's an entrepreneur, self-employed, and Walmart.
Yeah.
And the butcher is the self-employed baker, butcher, or doctor or whatever. that person is still a corporation. And
Of course.
that distinction gets lost in a lot of that. Like, oh, are you in favor or against corporations? And it's like, well, not to quote Mitt Romney, but like, corporations are people, my friend.
I mean, I'm not sure if the left actually knows what a corporation is, and
yeah, like
a corporation is essentially a company that is governed by a board of directors who elect a CEO. So it's literally a democratic business. That's what it is.
yeah, like it's literally people.
Yeah, but it doesn't make it any worse or any better than companies that are owned by a single owner or companies that are owned by two people. It doesn't make any difference. It's just,
No, like,
is it good? You know, as in the net positive or negative benefits it offers to society. I mean,
that's why I'm a big fan of Costco. Basically, they're eventually going to catch Walmart, I think.
Good.
And I worked there one summer, $11.50, well above the minimum wage at the time.
Oh.
And then one of my buddies, I have two buddies who are working there. Both have degrees. One has a business degree, and he says he gets paid more to loiter in the photo shop at Costco than he does at any job he could find with his business degree. And he doesn't have to take any risks. He's up over $20 an hour, like as benefits, as vacation time, and just hangs out with friends. And it's like, that's a pretty chill job, and you got all your shit together, and Costco's got good prices, and they actually pay their people well, rather than Walmart, where it's like notoriously prices so nice you pay for them twice because everybody's got like 90% of their employees are on food stamps or welfare or whatever other government incentive programs. And it's like that's not fuck that corporation, but fuck yeah, Costco, fuck yeah, local doctor, but fuck Walmart.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the left fails to make that distinction. They're like, no, like the doctor's not a corporation. He's a doctor. It's like, no, like when he files his taxes, he is as a small businessman because he owns his own local, like your family doctor owns his family practicum or whatever. Like, and it just drives me nuts. The liberals are just shitting the bed on that right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, in terms of the compass, yeah, the test is pretty crap.
Yeah, I mean, the problem is, yeah, as you said before, the quadrants seem completely fine, but it's just the questions, and the problem is
well, like one of the I'm trying to write that stupid little key or whatever to illustrate the difference in rhetoric between the sides and where their value distinctions lie, so that people can hopefully see why they hate each other and then come to hate each other less. And the first video I posted on that, kind of ranting, unscripted about it, somebody commented, some authoritarian right-winger commented, bitching about how we frame them as like libertarian-minded people frame authoritarian-minded people as like villainous. They're the enemy. They're collectivists, which is just a pejorative. Whereas for him, he sees it as unity. And like, I just started watching Sargon's recent Sargon of Akkad's recent live stream or interview with Jared Taylor. Yeah. And in the first like minute or two, the guy does exactly that. He talks about how like, oh, every other group, which is sort of what my thing talks about. He's talking about demographic groups. Every other group gets to be positive about their unity. Why can't we be positive about our unity? And it's like, oh shit, like, yeah, it isn't about collectivism and conformity. It's about like unity, like strength and unity kind of thing. Like they're the social people in this social species, which is an important part. Yeah. But
I mean, I do have a bit of a different,
as a libertarian,
of course, as you
frame it.
Yeah, I do have a bit of a different view on the political spectrum in general. It's that I actually, I mean, the thing is I understand where the Nazis are coming from. I understand where the white supremacists are coming from. I understand where the fascists are coming from. I even understand where all the pot smoking hippies coming from and where all the gun toting libertarians are coming from. I pretty well understand most of the groups on the political spectrum. It's just that when you're trying to place people on a quadrant, it's sometimes a little bit messy because of the fact that
definitely, I feel like instead of points on the quadrant, the people like instead of being a point on the quadrant, you should be like a shaded circle.
Yeah.
Like you have this much wiggle room in any direction. And because I don't think anybody's a Puritan. Nobody's in the furthest corner of any point. But by putting you on a point, it's like, oh, I'm in this color, so I'm not over here. It's like, no, you're just more in this color than you are in that color.
I'll just tell you that when I've had a few beers in my system, I go a little bit more authoritarian.
Oh, definitely. There's like certain key issues. I think issue by issue, everybody can be anything. Like I try to kind of obsess myself with being like fairly libertarian, and even the allegedly statist positions I hold because I see them at the end as like, okay, if this thing exists, you have more money in your pocket, therefore you have more liberty. Sweet, I'm in favor of that. That's sort of my argument for some of my kind of more statist positions. But then on something like vaccines, I turn into a fucking Pol Pot authoritarian nutbag. Like, oh, you're not going to vaccinate your kids? Well, it's okay. We're going to have state-funded snipers in the trees on the way to school, and they're going to shoot tranquilizer darts at your kids full of vaccines. How about that?
That's one way of solving the problem.
Yeah, like just over the top. But
yep. And then you throw the parents of the children that didn't get vaccinated out of helicopters. That's the next step, eh?
Oh yeah, well it depends. It depends how much they like free things. Like if you're gonna take a free ride, I'm not gonna say no.
Mommy, can I go?
Have you heard the oh fuck. Bill Burr, you know Bill Burr, comedian?
Yep.
Okay, he has a skit about some old dude who tries to kill himself by jumping out of a helicopter.
Oh.
And
Tell me about it.
It's like one of the funniest fucking skits. Is he just talks about this old guy living in Florida, like his wife dies or something, or he's diagnosed with like 6 different cancers, and he's just like shit out of luck. So he's like, fuck it, I'm just gonna off myself. I'm just done with it. So he goes and gets a fucking helicopter tour ride. And the guy drives him up in the helicopter, and it's like the dude's 3rd day of owning the helicopter company after he got it from like his father-in-law or some shit. And he's flying this guy up in the helicopter. Probably like, and Bill Burr does a great job of it, of just like imitating what it's like to listen to a fucking tour guide when you just don't give a shit. Like, oh, yeah, over on the left you'll see the Hollywood sign. He's like, that's great, fuck you. And so he's like, so the guy just looks up over the horizon, and he looks up over the city he loves, and decides that that's it, unbuckles his seatbelt and opens the door and just takes that final step, and he's going down to the earth, and he's fucking he flies down to the earth, and he's like talking about how beautiful it is and how his last moments on earth are so just perfect, exactly how he wanted them to be. And then he hits the water, and then there's just an insurmountable level of pain. Like he already thought in his diagnosis, he'd already thought he'd gone through as much pain as he could handle, and he just like triples it immediately on impact because he doesn't die. He just like jumps out of a helicopter and belly flops from like 800 feet or something. It's like, oh no, fuck. Yeah. So if you're gonna do the free helicopter ride idea, don't go over the ocean, I think is the moral of that
story. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Fuck. Have you seen Mexico in the last day or so?
Earthquakes.
Yeah.
Hundreds of people dying. Yep.
Yeah, buildings just falling, just craziness. And then between that and and the crazy hurricane season that we got going on. There's like 3 more in line. Apparently Jose and Maria might meet up and hit as far north as New York State and the east coast of Canada. What the fuck are hurricanes doing up there? Fuck off.
I could totally picture a bunch of social justice warriors on Tumblr. What they do is they draw human representations of Jose and Maria fucking, and then what happens is they produce an offspring hurricane that's worse than the both of them and just wipes the whole world clean.
Yeah. At least the East Coast, anyway. It's looking fucked.
Yeah.
Okay,
it'd be so cool if
the global warming.
Cool if they had. Yeah, it'd be so cool if they had like this some sort of political cartoon where you got this huge hurricane coming through New York. You got New Yorkers saying, "Hey, I'm walking here."
Probably exists somewhere from Hurricane Sandy. Yeah, global warming. What are your thoughts on that? Is that a real thing, or is that just overhype, or is it man-made, or is it a thing that man has nothing to do with, or what?
I haven't had whatchamacallit. My thoughts on it are a little bit varied, but it's this thing where I'm not certain to the degree in which humans have contributed to the climate changing, so to speak. I'm aware of the fact that they do have an effect on it.
Yeah.
But the thing is I've got to be honest. I understand that there is a possibility of the world ending because of global warming and because of the ozone layer, evaporating or whatnot. But not my main concern with the environment. My main concern because I think it is longer down the road than what the scientists have predicted, because climate models aren't completely, or at least their interpretations of their own models aren't completely reliable. So I'm just kind of waiting to see how they will better their models until I take a firm stand on it. But I will say that a lot of people are actually exploiting the global warming phenomenon to make a lot of money when they really shouldn't be.
Yeah, I'll agree with that.
I mean, I think the Paris climate deal, for example, and the Kyoto Protocol as another example, those were mostly just cash grabbing schemes.
It's because expensive virtue signaling. It's like, man, either just do something or don't.
Yeah, and here I think this is the key to stopping global warming, if indeed us humans are causing it. Okay, so one way is to kill half the population. The other way is to actually.
In which case, the fascists are right.
Yeah. Yeah. In that case, they are. And another way I think is actually for the. I mean, this is a bit of a controversial stance, I suppose, but the other way, in my opinion, is to dismantle the UN and to dismantle kind of the international order in general, to have every nation for themselves. And the reason why this is because the only way I could see humanity getting out of this sticky situation is if every single nation on this earth were to drop their stupid wars, drop their stupid conflicts, and begin their own industrial revolutions. I actually do not think that is possible for a nation, a primitive nation, like, a bunch of nations in Africa, like Zimbabwe and shit, to be moving on to green technology just yet. They have to first develop a penchant and a thirst for effective energy to begin with.
Yeah.
Only from everything starts in phases. Every project starts in phases. And I hear my prime minister, can we say where our country of origin is?
Yeah, whatever.
Okay, we're both from Canada.
Yeah.
Okay, so we got PM because it's 2015 selfie prime minister, basically sending billions to a bunch of African nations, and not in order to feed the poor and the homeless and the hungry, but to improve their environmental record, to make investments in green energy, as they call it. Well, I'm sorry, but they're still burning down trees. The people haven't heard your plea for help yet. They can't hear it.
Warm their huts with shit. They still cook with.
Exactly.
Man.
Yeah. So
it's what drives me nuts. Okay. I definitely understand your position, I think, and can empathize with it. What drives me the most nuts about this is I think even I know I'm the one who kind of asked your positions. I kind of stuck you in that in this spot, but I sort of think the whole debate is a giant distraction.
Yeah.
Like, I'm way more. To me, the two things that can do the most for climate change are widespread adoption of nuclear energy
Yup.
to replace coal plants, and
Mm.
widespread acceptance and investments in GMO technology to reduce
Yeah.
emissions from food wastes and to reduce uh, population growth. Because once you are stable in your food supply, you become more economically stable, and once you're economically stable, you stop having kids for labor,
Mhm.
and that's the only way you reduce population growth. So I think those two things are the two biggest things for preventing further climate change, at least as caused by humans. And then you go look at who gives a shit about those issues. Most conservative Christians who think climate change is a giant crock of shit, they have no problem with either of those. And if you explain nuclear to them and like the potential in terms of energy power and how it's the only one that can really get us from planet to planet, and how it's fiscally like the best one once the investment's in, it's the cheapest, biggest bang for the buck. Like the most conservative Christians who don't believe climate change is a thing will come around on nuclear, and a lot of them don't give a shit about GMOs except for the Alex Jonesy types. Um, the people who care the most about that shit, who freak out the most, who oppose that stuff the most, is Greenpeace and environmentalists, alleged environmentalists, who are like, everybody needs to accept that this is a problem. Now I'm going to go protest the solution. Fuck yourselves.
I mean,
uh,
it's this thing where they've monetized climate change, and they keep hiring people to play dead because this is what's gonna happen when everyone's dying of terrible air and shit like that, and it's and they're always protesting against these GMOs like golden rice and all. Like
oh, golden rice
GMOs
is the
are,
one. It's
yeah. I mean,
oh man, like that was first available in 2002. Still not in widespread use. So there's still hundreds of thousands of kids dying of that specific malnutrition every year. Totally preventable.
yeah. I
Oh,
mean, it's come to the point where the climate alarmists want to pretend that they care about the earth, and a lot of them I'm sure do. I
I'm
grant
sure
them
their
that.
beliefs are earnest, but
But
like,
the problem is when see, one of the things that I've learned in business school, at least at my the institution that I've studied at, they teach you operations management. One of the first things they teach you in operations management is how to construct a Pareto chart. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Pareto chart, but
no.
essentially what it is it's how you prioritize your tasks.
Okay.
So, in a manager's life, which is basically what Greenpeace wants to do. They want to manage the environment. So if they wanted to manage the environment, they should learn actually how to. So what you would do is you would do a threat assessment. So basically, what environmental threat is the most important? What's the environmental threat that is causing the most problems? And however you choose to quantify it, you put that, you just create a chart
Yeah.
around it.
You
But
just need to define your metrics and then.
so yeah, and so essentially what it is it's kind of a checklist or to-do list if you want to think of it that way. It could be used that way. So basically the first one that is causing, usually around 40 or 50% or maybe even 60% of the problems. Actually, sorry, so it starts at 80%. Whatever costs close to 80% of the problems, you want to try to get on first. So, what energy source is causing the most problems? I think at present it's probably coal. So, okay, you could
Yeah.
get focused on combating coal, but then when you go down the line, you might find it's a little more difficult to get
When you
energy
get,
consumption down to, yeah.
yeah, you need to do the best you can with what you got, and you can only improve that by addressing the worst and getting rid of it for better. Like,
Yeah. But the
sort
way
of like
Greenpeace is doing it is they're just scattering everywhere. They're saying no to coal, no to LNG, no to everything. And you can't build a logical environmental campaign like that. You have to focus on one thing and only one thing until you get the shit done. Otherwise, you can't.
I think
Otherwise, you just come across as a job killer, because that's what they are, and a child killer by the looks of it.
I do wonder. I'd have to go look at Greenpeace's history. I do wonder about their if they've ever had any religious connotations, because I have a sort of sinking suspicion that a major flaw of the exodus from the churches of atheists is that they don't find a cohesive assertion to go to afterwards. They just become deconstructionists, and deconstructionists never construct anything. They just tear everything down. And it's like, no, you have to have a position that you assert. If you don't, then you're never going to progress anywhere. You're never going to build anything. There's no motive. There's no why. There's just not that over and over again forever.
Of course, I mean the problem is Western civilization. You know, you don't actually won't be hearing that term from me all that often, but Western civilization was built on the premise that we want to build the best thing in the world. And you know, the reason why Trump won the last election, I think one of the reasons is because people looked up to him because he was a builder, he was a doer, he was an ass kicker, he was a shit disturber. But the fact is he built things.
Yeah.
He was a real estate mogul. Whatever you think of him, he built it.
I do think,
and that's what America is all about: building cars, building shit. And it's not necessarily, what has to do in terms of, you have to be in the car industry or whatnot, but it's the metaphor of just constantly building yourself up and being better than you were before. Right now it's, oh, what were your flaws before? What did you do? Oh, you used to be an alcoholic, eh? Well, maybe you should claim victim status because you're a past. Well, fuck the past. I've shed my snakeskin. I am evolving. Screw off.
There's so I'm sure you know the classic Voltaire quote about that he who can be convinced of absurdity can be compelled to do atrocity, or some variation on that. Mm-hmm. And I sort of think it's not quite right, because it sounds like somebody else is the compelling force. What I think it's the degree to which we err is the degree to which we willingly harm. So, like, going back to Greenpeace, they're incorrect about GMOs and nuclear energy. So because they're wrong, they harm the world by being activists against those things. When like everybody, literally every terrorist in the world does the same thing. They think they're right, and they think they're the good guy and then they act in a certain way. And the way that they act causes harm to the degree that they were wrong. Does that make sense? I feel like that might just be.
I think you might have said it. I think you might have said it twice, but I think it was right. I think it was right twice.
So I just think, Greenpeace falls for this a lot, and so do a lot of the millennials and deconstructivist types, where it's just because I don't have an assertion, and it's easy to be certain of criticisms. They're certain nobody else is right, and they're certain like they're certain about things, like the biology thing. They're certain that everyone's the same.
Well, the fact is
so if you prove that people aren't all the same, then you're evil. And it's like, no, I'm not evil. You're just incorrect. Oh, now you're going to try to stop me from saying my opinion because I'm evil. Well, now you're just further wrong, causing further harm.
Exactly. I just find it kind of funny because I think it's become this. This toxic culture and the kind of the postmodernist movement. I think it stems from the fact that they've confused deconstructionism with construction in of itself.
Yeah, they don't have any assertions, and they confuse their criticisms for their positions and their non-positions. Like, I think this is why the atheist movement is sort of like an error in a way, because it's a movement of a response to a position. It's a movement of a non-position. And it's like,
Yeah.
we need an assertion to all rally behind and agree on, but there isn't one. And that's fine, because I think most atheists do have such a position or such a rallying point just outside of theology and supernatural things. Largely, it's like gaming communities and shit. But
Yeah.
if you don't have that, gaming community, if you just leave the theology for the deconstructionism, what you tend to fall to, it seems to me, is communism, because it's the deconstructionist end game, pretty much. It's like deconstruct everything until everything's equal, and then everything will be perfect. And it's like, no, then everyone will be equally dead.
Yeah. I mean, the problem is it's this idea of, I think, there are many problems with it, but one of it is the role of government. Actually, I'd like to ask you a question. What do you think is the role of government, if you had to summarize it, whichever way you please, as long as you like?
Fuck. The role of government, I think, pretty much to the role of government is to keep other governments at bay. That's pretty much it. How
Interesting. So you're a foreign policy kind of guy.
Well, like, for one thing, like, those are both foreign and domestic. If I am a government of a country, I am interested in maintaining myself as a government. I do not want another government to rise up and usurp me. One way I have to prevent that is to constantly appease or oppress my civilians, my population. I prefer democracy, where it's a constant appeasement. So like that's where I think a lot of right-wing libertarians get mistaken and kind of fall into the anarcho-capitalist sinkhole, where it's like, oh no, like, yeah, the government should exist to keep other governments from oppressing the citizens, and that's it. And it's like, well, one of the ways it does that is to kind of like buy off our votes, yeah, my self-interests are for sale. I don't know why that is something to be weird about.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that I'm not sure if you watched the Ben Shapiro and Cenk Uygur debate when they were talking about
I've only seen
political
highlights.
finance.
I need to watch the whole thing. I've only seen highlights.
You haven't seen the whole thing yet?
No,
I watched the whole thing from start to finish a whole bunch of times already.
Oh man, I gotta get on that.
Mostly in the background.
Yeah, I've seen probably 20 minutes of it, but
yeah, that's bullshit. No, that never happened.
Oh man,
but I can definitely tell that Cenk Uygur tried to restrain himself as much as possible during that debate.
Oh man, I feel bad for the guy, and he's so frustrating. It's like, I'm not sure
I've always hated him.
Like
I've always hated him since I went onto YouTube. This was weird thing where it was during the time when it was cool to hate on Justin Bieber because of his stupid haircut and his high voice and shit. But I remember that time clearly. And then when the Young Turks did a video on Justin Bieber lambasting him on because apparently he didn't know what Germany was or what German was.
Oh yeah.
And so they were making fun of him. And I was just like, oh guys, Young Turks. Okay, so it was like, I don't know when it was, like 2010 or sometime.
That would have been I think that would have been like 20 oh shit, that would have been 2010 or 11, I guess. I was a fan of them in like 2008. I first started listening to them, and I was quite a big fan of theirs for a few years. And I do remember that being like a cringy moment, but I was sort of a fan.
I just remember it was the moment, like it was the first time I actually really heard of the Young Turks. And I remember from that point on, I started hating them because it was this thing where it's like, Cenk, you managed to make me hate the Young Turks and side with Justin Bieber. How fucking dare you? But
yeah, I don't know.
But it was the first time, and it was just this thing where
I think he's just been so lost.
This guy's a rich kid. Okay, this guy's a rich kid who's been sheltered his entire life. Who
has went out there and made a skill, so everyone appeases.
He went out there and made a stupid video. It's probably going to be the only thing he's going to be good at in his entire life, and he doesn't know German. I mean, I got to be honest. I didn't like Justin Bieber. I hated his music, but I hated most music at the time anyway, but it was
Yeah.
this thing where it was this thing where it's like, okay, I already have an opinion that Justin Bieber is not to my liking. When someone, and it's this thing, I think it's a personality trait I have where, and it kind of prevents me from being stuck in an echo chamber where when I have the same opinion as the person next to me, and the person next to me
Is
starts acting all self-righteous and saying that they're better than the person that I don't like, just because of a small thing like I don't know what German is, like a small statement like that, because that was what the whole video was about, was him saying I don't know what German is. I'm sorry, I can't like the guy next to me. That person hasn't put in the work or the effort to even think on a logical basis. They're just throwing shit around. And frankly, some of the shit happened to land in my mouth. And so I spit it out and I punch them in the face and leave them all button up. But yeah, I hate it. It's just intellectual laziness.
Yeah, they what really made them jump the shark for me was the Sam Harris interview. And I was sort of like, man,
that's what all the classical libs say. They're like,
yeah, everyone's like, oh man, that wasn't even like there was already a lot of straws in the back, and it probably only needed a few more to get broken. But that was like dropping a fucking grand piano out of the sky. Like it was just like, wait, are you, man? I thought you were fairly reasonable, and I feel like Cenk is just like gotten himself stuck in a yes man echo chamber where all he does every day is confirm his own preconceptions with cherry-picked news articles. And I'm not even sure he knows he's doing it. And I think it just makes him like more and more nuts. And it's like, fuck, how do you break the cycle? How does somebody, because it sounds like Dave Rubin wanted to break the cycle and tried to talk to him about it and wound up just leaving the entire network instead. So it's like, fuck, you're just, buddy, I want you to not suck. I used to like you. And when you're on point, like when he's going off about like lobbying and shit, when he's on point, he can be on fucking point. But when he's not on point, it's just so embarrassing. And he's just so proudly fucking totally oblivious to how painful he is. Like when he's a while ago when he was misquoting Palin, when she was talking about she said something that was just like normal, and then he misquoted her to make it sound racist because he expected her to be racist, so he just like misheard.
Yeah, I know which one you're talking about. And he actually quoted it right, but then misquoted her.
Yeah, like within like the same minute. It's just like, oh my god, fuck, Cenk. When you're on point, you're quality, and if you could just do that all the time, it would be great. But between the Sarah Palin thing and the Sam Harris interview, and some of the times when you're like, man, why are you cherry picking this? Why are you making this outlier example the societal norm? Like when he's doing that shit, it's like, fuck, somebody needs to just like take away your channel.
I got to ask you though, and I'm real curious about this. How have your views changed since around the 2010 period? I would ask, or 2011 period.
Let's see. I feel like in terms of on like principles, I don't think it's changed, and in terms of what stances. I've recently kind of enlightened myself on one issue I had that I think is maybe an issue that a lot of people on the left have, and I'm sure it's an observation other people have made, but I'm calling it the racer fallacy. And I'm sure you've seen the meme around where it's we want equality of opportunity, not results, and it shows a 100-meter race where it's everybody starts at the same line and everybody ends differently. Like just because there's a difference to the end conclusion doesn't mean that it was unfair. And I feel like that's a good meme in terms of like that's how I want the world to run, but that's the racer fallacy. Nobody was born at the same time. Nobody started at the same time.
Exactly.
We are in a generational relay race. Like as long as the background rules to the race are fair, then that's what should be measured. But in terms of like an equal start line, there is no start line. There is no finish line. There's only the race. And
Yeah.
I feel like people miss that and they worry too much about artificial start and end lines. And I think that's a perspective change that I've had since 2010 is I think I used to think of it more as there's a start line and everyone should have an equal start line. And it's like, no, there isn't a start line. Everyone should have an equal race. And
you moved further to the right.
Maybe, I guess. Yeah, like
Not by much, but I mean, just ever so slightly.
There's certain things where I've definitely been like convinced that what I thought was the solution was counterproductive. And I don't think that necessarily means I move to the right. I just think that means I am pragmatic. Like, I don't want to be a political partisan or a Puritan. I don't think the world works that way. I want the results out of the world that I think make the world better. Sometimes that means everybody should be allowed to do whatever the fuck they want. If everybody's crazy and wants to lynch people with multicolored eyes, then I think that means an authoritarian dictator who stops those people from lynching the guy with multicolored eyes. Like, so, yeah. Oh shit, there's some saying that I really want to pull out right now, but I am drawing a blank on. Fuck, whatever.
Well, I mean, like, my basis for saying that you were maybe going a little bit rightward is in the. I'm kind of modeling like my picture of a right, a person who's as far to the right as possible, like just.
Well, like both my parents were small C conservatives before the Canadian Conservative parties matched up, and like if I really wanted to, I could probably get some like fairly big name conservative politicians at least on email within like a week or two through my parents, because just they have a lot of random connections in the Conservative Party. So at least in like I feel like I'm Canadian conservative, which is still pretty lefty.
Can we tell the audience who you voted for last election?
Oh, I voted for.
We can. I voted for you. We can.
I voted for a dictator and cuck.
And no, you voted for a fucking commie, man. Fucking commie trash we should have thrown out of a helicopter long ago.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, our embarrassment of a country couldn't find anybody better. So I sort of couldn't
find anybody better, but that's kind of funny because Justin Trudeau was elected based upon the public. So the public actually, they didn't need membership in the Liberal Party to vote for Justin Trudeau as the new Liberal leader. So the Canadian people ultimately chose him, so-called fair and square. Yeah. But the problem is, and, we haven't been, I guess, Facebook friends for very long, but what I've said in the past is, and this is fairly pessimistic, but it's still true and it still remains true to this day. I've lost faith in the democratic system, and it's not in the sense that because I got the wrong results that I'm all butthurt and shit like the Hillary Clinton voters were after Donald Trump's victory, but it's in the sense that it's in the way that he got elected and in the rhetoric that was used by his campaign. I could not believe that people fell for his bullshit. Because he betrayed every single person he came across in order to come to the top. He betrayed the people who were appointed by his father. He betrayed the people who helped him get to where he was, like Mark Emery and Jody Emery, by arresting their compatriots. He betrayed all the young students by the young students who were talking about lowering tuition fees and shtick like that. And
can I stop you there for a second?
Yeah, sure.
I agree with everything. Absolutely everything you've said. He was still the best option. That's how bad the options were last time. Like Mulcair has been, he has just danced from party to party depending on how he thinks he can get elected. He is not interested in any principles. He is just a politician in it for himself. And he's with the most communist type party. He promised to increase spending and tax cuts somehow because he can't math. And then we had Stephen Harper, who's probably realistically the best at being prime minister. Unfortunately, he decided to run as the I'm going to keep all the drugs as illegal as possible guy while campaigning with the Ford brothers, who at the time are internationally famous drug addicts. And that's who Trudeau had to contend with. And Trudeau was pretty much like, yo, I'm going to legalize and tax weed, and shit's expensive. Hopefully the bills won't get too high. And it's like, oh, look, that guy's honest and he's going to do something I want. Fuck yeah. Like that's
so my question to you. So my question to you then. So my question to you then was, why didn't you stop at the Stephen Harper would probably be the best prime minister, eh? Because I mean that's all I'm voting for.
His doubling down on the war on drugs, I think, is just like borderline unforgivable. And at the time, I wasn't that convinced. I was less convinced at that time of him being competent than I am now. I think now he was more competent than I thought he was at the time. But even then, I'd still go Trudeau today because man.
What? Are you fucking serious, man?
Yep.
He was at least in my mind, he was the worst option out of all of them.
I think he was.
I don't think there could have been a worse option, even out of most of the Liberal leadership candidates. I think he was the worst possible outcome that Canada could have elected, even over the communists.
I feel almost identical to him as I do to Trump, in that I feel I was like, the options I was presented with were embarrassing, and given what they campaigned on, not necessarily what either of them will do, because who the fuck knows, but given what they campaigned on, I think they were the best option, best of bad options. And what's happened since then, I'm not that convinced that I should change my mind. I'm more convinced with Trudeau and Harper than I am with Trump and Hillary. Hillary's been a fucking dumpster fire since the election. It was like, I thought maybe she'd just quietly scurry off and then maybe have something sane to say once in a while, but she's coming out with like, here's what my speech would have been. I'm going to pretend I'm the president. It's like, oh my God, you fucking lunatic. Trump was clearly the best choice. But
well, it was just that you're worried about Hillary. But
with Trudeau, Harper did he was like, okay, I lost. I'm done. Peace, everybody. And he's just kind of let other people do the talking for him. And to me, that's like, oh, look, Harper's much more reasonable than all his counterparts.
Yeah, I think this is going to be the greatest, perhaps, source of disagreement between us, because I've thought through the entire election that Trudeau, and I still hold this opinion to this day, that Trudeau was the absolute worst prime minister that could have been elected out of the 2015 election. And it's because of the fact that
hoping for the NDP, and just everything they seemed to do just felt like it was directly trying to alienate me from voting for them. And then Harper with the just, I'm going to double down on what's clearly an out of date position with the worst possible campaign crew. Just like between those two things, it just pushed me to Trudeau, and Trudeau's garbage piece of shit. But we can run him out next election, and it looks like he really wants us to, because I don't think he actually understands any of the things he's trying to govern.
Well, I mean,
so if I can piss off everybody before the next election, maybe I won't have to do this anymore.
Just to be clear, Carson,
yeah.
I'm relatively conciliatory with people who have different opinions about Trudeau, but I'll say this, that, you know, when it comes to me personally, my level of hatred for Trudeau, consider this. I remember pretty close after the election, and this wasn't done by me, this was done by a few Albertans, of course. Of course, it's always the Albertans. That Justin Trudeau, just by the virtue of his election and winning the election, there has been a growing sentiment among a few Western Canadians to secede from the Canadian country. And I know it sounds a little bit nuts.
It'll never happen, though. I'm sort of interested in that, especially I've seen the, I think it's called Cascadia. That is British Columbia, kind of Alberta, Idaho, Washington, and Oregon. And if that was a country, it would be like the 5th largest GDP or something.
No. I'm speaking about just British
I know.
Columbia,
I,
Alberta,
yeah, I
Saskatchewan,
know.
and
I know.
Manitoba.
I've seen the concept of Cascadia be a thing, and that interests me a decent amount. Just out BC Alberta secession. I'm interested in how that conversation goes, but I don't think that is ever going to be a thing.
No, it's not. I don't think so either. But I definitely entertain it in my mind because more than ever, even more so now than at the conclusion of the election, I do support the idea, because just everything that is going on in Ottawa is going on at our expense.
Yeah,
And the fact is I mean, his father did the exact same thing. I hate to go back to his father because I think his father is maybe a little bit
competent.
worse than was a bit worse than Justin Trudeau, in every single way possible. I mean, I think I should kind of throw this out in the open before you get maybe a little confused. I am a Christian conservative, so understand when.
Okay,
Okay, so I'm not going to go all God and Deus
that's
Vult
fine.
on you, but
We should definitely have that conversation sometime because I am very
yeah.
interested in a Christian perspective on my view of like the monomyth. I want to kind of present it to as many different religious perspectives as I can, just because I think they all kind of conform to the monomyth, but none of them I think really recognize it. And I think if they recognized it, they'd have a better time both maintaining membership of the skeptical and just like justifying their own existence to themselves. I don't know.
I kind of understand what you mean. I mean, I'll have to kind of take a look at the book of
Yeah,
literature you're referring
look
to.
up Joseph Campbell. Just anything you can on the guy. He has an interview series with Bill Moyers that you can find around online. And yeah, the guy's fucking. He was the mythology expert of the last century. Buddies with George, who's the Star Wars guy? George Lucas.
Yeah,
And
interesting.
apparently George Lucas basically like ad-libbed Star Wars out of the mythology work that Joseph Campbell did.
Hmm.
I have this little chart. If you look up the hero's journey, and there's you can find a chart where it's like the hero's journey is kind of like a checklist of of plot points that a character has to go through in order to develop from just a normal person or like average Joe to mythological legendary hero by the end of it. And if you go through all the plot points, like there's a ton of just similarity between all the mythology. And I'm sure you're sort of familiar with that. And it, yeah, just I find it very
A little
compelling.
bit of that, yeah.
Anyway, I got to get going to sleep here. So
Yep.
you want to
Okay.
wrap this for now, and then we will do this again next week with a little better preparation.
Definitely much better preparation next time around.
Yeah.
Okay. That's cool. Okay, anyway, have a good week then.
Cool. And look forward to seeing your videos pop up whenever they start popping.
Definitely. Have a good one.
Okay. Cool. See you.